Good morning. I'm Senator Elaine Alquist, and with me we have Assembly Members Nora Campos and Paul Fong, and I want to thank them also, and I want to thank you for being here. I have some opening remarks. As chair of the California's State Senate Select Committee on Emerging Technologies and Economic Competitiveness, I would like to welcome my fellow legislators. Thank you. Our panelists and the members of the audience. First, I would like to mention that this hearing was rescheduled today from its original date on October 11th because I was in the midst of jury duty selection process in San Jose that had started the week before, and they still had at that point not decided to let me out. And I actually was called up and so forth. Anyway, so due to this unforeseen scheduling conflict, some of our original speakers were not available today, including Brian Sager from Nano Solar, a San Jose-based solar company, and also Monique Ramos from Superintendent Tom Torlexon's office. Ms. Ramos has her written testimony available for this hearing, and my staff will provide you with a copy. I want to thank our wonderful host, NASA Ames Research. You all have been wonderful, Ms. Blacker and the group for many, many years, and it's such a wonderful place in our Senate district to hold this hearing. And because of you being so gracious, this is our third hearing at this location. In today's world, information technology is at the heart of the global economy. You can't pick up the paper without understanding that. With the rapid growth of emerging technologies, California needs to ensure that its workforce is prepared for the digital economy. Nice to see you, Chuck. To ensure that we have a digitally skilled workforce that can work with the next iPad or the emerging Web 3.0, which will take the internet to the next level of search capability, we must provide our students, and I say this as a former teacher, not only with a foundation in reading, writing, and analysis, but also provide them with the knowledge and skills that they need to apply technology effectively in the digital workplace. In essence, the legislature must enact policies to ensure rapid implementation and integration of technology into California's education system. I am talking about ensuring that the workforce of the future has not just the technical skills to operate the latest and greatest gadget, but also the social and analytical skills to work and collaborate in virtual offices where your teammates beam in from around the world and speak different primary languages, to access meaningful information with a click and not just rely on the first Wikipedia entry that comes up from Google search, and to focus and separate the wheat from the chaff of the gigabytes of data that are thrown at us electronically today. So we want our students to be able to analyze, to figure out what is useful information, what is accurate, and what is not. California's competitiveness in the world's economy could be affected if we ignore the role of technology in shaping the future of our education and our economy. That's why I have worked hard to see that our students are learning in 21st century classrooms. We're not there yet. And that this digital generation is not further segregated from the iApp haves and have-nots. For example, I authored 2 bills that did become law to increase the availability of digital textbooks in both our K-12 and our college classes. SB 247 of 2010 was the K-12 bill, and SB 49 of 2010 was the higher education bill. I also have a 2-year legislative proposal on increasing the availability of open source digital instructional materials in our classrooms. That bill is SB 613. Open source has the great advantage of being free, which with our economy the way it is today and the state being so many billions of dollars in the hole, it is helpful that open source is free, and we should make use of that. Today, this committee is seeking feedback from a wide range of experts in the field to develop policies to help our state both with its economic recovery and global competitiveness. Of course, with the state's ongoing budget deficit, visible policy solutions will need to be based on public-private partnerships that can help bring private resources into our many classrooms. We will hear testimony from Microsoft on its current needs for a technology specialized workforce, and I imagine what they will be saying will apply to many of our technology companies today, bio and others. We will also hear testimony from UC Professor Mark Warschauer could transform our schools. Here today also are representatives from the Silicon Valley Education Foundation and the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. They will speak on how we can implement these new technologies and empower the iApp generation for career success. Last but not least, we will hear from the California Council on Science and Technology on how we can digitally enhance education in California. As one whose undergraduate degree is in pure mathematics, and every once in a while, particularly with some of the guys, I mentioned that on the Senate floor, and one who did teach second-year algebra and trigonometry in the public schools in the late 60s, during the dark ages, I think there's much to do in upgrading student skills in math, science, and technology, and I think we are really still far behind. Before we start, let me just mention a few housekeeping items. We are taping today's hearing. If you would like a copy, please contact my office. And speaking of my office, I would like to give a great round of thanks. So if you all could stand up, I see John Helso, District Director. I see Lena Hamilton from the Capitol Office, consultant to this subcommittee, who was very responsible for this hearing. And I see Lisandro Carrasco and Carol Ong, and where's our Katie? Is in the back. Okay, so thank you all for being here. Then after all this, we will have public testimony at the end, and we will limit that to 1 minute per person, and if you would like to do that, please raise your hand so my staff can know about that. And my last comment before we go, and before I introduce my colleagues again, is that I'm sure many of you know that I will be termed out of the legislature December 2012. That's not my choice, that is the law. And I will be one of the very few members who will have done the full 14 years in the state legislature. It's a max of 6 years in the state assembly, which I did. And this coming year, starting in January, will be my 8th year in the state Senate. And of course, 8 years is the max. So it's really important that we have our assembly members here today, because they're going to be around for quite a while. They're both excellent, and I would like both of them to make a brief comment. So, Ms. Nora Campos, Assembly Member, would you like to start?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And first of all, I want to recognize your leadership. Almost 14 years in the state of California, and I think that today is going to end one of the conversations that you had, but also the beginning of future conversations about technology. So thank you for your leadership in the technology world. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure my colleague does as well. The other thing, I think that the Senator outlined why technology is so important, not only within California, but for the world. And because she talked about several technical issues of why it's important, I want to share with you a few stories about how this is affecting and how it's going to impact the middle class as well as communities that are underserved. So first of all, I'll start off with San Antonio, and I had the honor of touring San Antonio Elementary School on the day that the children actually received their iPads. And so here now, the children within a community that is underserved they're learning technology firsthand, and the instructors are actually able to give instruction through the iPad as she is actually, or he is actually giving the lesson plan. And I think that is pretty phenomenal. Which was really exciting for me to be able to be in the classroom on the first day, is that they discovered that there is a camera component to them. So the one thing that they all were excited about was that the teacher had asked them, gave them certain things that they needed to explore within the classroom, and they were taking pictures of that, and then they would be giving a presentation on the things that they found within the classroom. And I thought that was pretty phenomenal, and they were excited. And as they were learning their mathematics through the iPad, they were exploring different ways to actually come to the conclusion of the problem. The other thing, I had the honor and the privilege of visiting Valley Fair when Microsoft opened their new store. And what I found very phenomenal is that they were granting 2 schools in my community as well that are underserved, and they will be fitting those schools with technology, state-of-the-art technology. What I think is very phenomenal for the children of my community, which is underserved in certain ports, which is East San Jose, to be able to learn firsthand what technology will actually do for them and their future. And why do I share these certain stories with you? Because it goes to what the senator talked about. California, and I think Silicon Valley, as we all know, it's not a secret that we have some of the best universities here. We are educating our future workforce at the university level, but we also need to be able to educate our workforce at K through 12 so that they can enter those universities, and we're growing our own talent right here in Silicon Valley. It is, and I think we all embrace talent that comes in from other countries, but we also need to think about, if we're going to continue to be competitive in the global economy, we need to grow our own workforce. So I share those 2 stories with you because I think that it is important that we continue to embrace public-private partnerships, because that really is going to be the way that we are grooming our workforce in the future. So, Senator, thank you for continuing to be a leader in this emerging technology for California and for Silicon Valley.
Thank you, Assemblymember Campos. And with that, I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Paul Fong.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Alquist, for holding this hearing. It's very important since we are the innovation capital of the world. You know, STEM education is relatively new in our schools, science, technology, engineering, and math, and I totally encourage it, because in the Cupertino School District, 5 out of the top 10 schools in the state are from the Cupertino School District, and they actually spend a lot of time on STEM. And so, you know, it really enhances the test-taking abilities and enhances their education. Also, we are going to be 1 million graduates short, according to the Campaign for College Opportunity, by the year 2025. We have room for 1 million graduates that the workplace will be accommodating by the year 2025, and we will not be producing these graduates at that level. And so I tried to help out with it with AB 2302. It's a transfer reform movement that enhances SB 1440, which will allow community college students to go through the transfer maze and streamline their transfer to the 4-year colleges, hopefully to get through in 4 years or less, or 5 years or less. Anyway, I really appreciate you doing this, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Assemblymember. And when you were talking about the Cupertino Union School District, I just have to say that I started my elective service career in 1983 when I was elected to and served on the board of the Cupertino Union School District for 8 years, 2 of those years as board president, where we began a lot of these programs. Also, I've carried legislation on STEM that's been signed into law in the legislature. Well, with that, I think we will begin. Our first panel, I'd like to introduce Kristen Rhodes, who is the General Manager for Education West Region for Microsoft. Welcome. We're so glad you are here. And Ms. Rhodes, you have 10 minutes to present. And then we will, after that, we'll have 5 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you so much. Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Alquist, Assemblywoman Campos, and Assemblyman Fong. I so appreciate everyone allowing Microsoft to have the opportunity to present today. So I do have some prepared notes, and I'll of course, try to address the questions that were posed to Microsoft for this hearing today. But so much of just the introductory conversation sparked so many things. Microsoft has such an investment in education and investing in our workforce, and we're doing so much every day. It's definitely hard to cover even a little minutia of that in these next 10 minutes, but I'll go ahead and attempt to do that. So I want to start out and just talk a little bit about Microsoft's stake in the Silicon Valley area. So we have been here since 1981, growing both through direct hiring and acquisitions over the last 30 years. While Microsoft employs 90 million full-time employees globally, we actually employ 3,000 full-time employees right here in Silicon Valley. If you count our contractors, it's probably double that number. So this is actually our number 2 largest location for employers. So we're very, very invested in continuing to have a thriving workforce and community to hire and draw from. Every year, Microsoft is a top philanthropic contributor in the world. We also contribute very significantly in California, and thank you, Assemblywoman Campos, for making that acknowledgement of that grant to the school. We've donated nearly $250 million in cash, software, and training curriculum here in the state since 2003. Just in the last month alone, we donated $16.7 million in cash and software grants to 60 nonprofits in the Bay Area. Now, those were an effort to increase college and career readiness. So we absolutely, the point that I think was made, agree it has to be a private-public partnership. So these investments aren't just random charitable acts, but they're truly investments in local nonprofits and schools that we see that have high impact and are community leaders that will have lasting focus on the youth and empower themselves through education and innovation and entrepreneurship. So I really want to start addressing how we can help recruit talent in California. As you know, recruiting talent is a challenge everywhere. It's not just difficult here. High-tech talent there's just a lack of talent. I think I heard the statistic that Assembly Fong said about being 1 million graduates short, which goes exactly with the statistic that I had, that by 2018, we will need 22 million new college degrees to meet the demand created by American employers, but will fall short by at least 3 million degrees. That's a deficit of 300,000 college graduates every year between 2008 and 2018. So what are we doing to prepare? Well, we know that we're starting, of course, in K-12 with STEM education. Microsoft is highly invested in STEM education. We do a number of things, a number of the programs that we've always had. We have a program called IT Academy. IT Academy has traditionally been thought of as a workforce development program. It offers 1,500 courses that enable students, not only students, but faculty and staff to learn and certify on Microsoft technologies. Right now, today, there's over 60,000 job postings nationwide that require Microsoft IT certifications. I had the honor just last week at the APEC Summit in Hawaii to announce our first statewide IT Academy launch with the entire state public library system in Hawaii. They will offer Microsoft IT Academy to 1 million of their library patrons. So this was seen as a huge economic stimulant for people that are currently unemployed, students, people returning to the workforce, et cetera. So what we've seen also is not only is IT Academy appropriate for the community colleges, appropriate for returning workers to retrain and retool, but it also has a very, very strong STEM alignment. Kids can actually get AP college credit for taking the computer science courses through IT Academy. One thing, too, we see that's happening here specifically in California, and I think Assemblyman Fong addressed this, is really that bridge. So although graduation rates right here in Silicon Valley remain relatively strong in the high 80%, the actual percent that meet entrance requirements for either the University of California system or the California State University system is only 50%. When you expand that across the state, it's much worse. It's only 35% of all California state high school graduates that actually meet those entrance requirements. So figuring out what that bridge is, working with the community colleges and the K-12 system is very, very critically important. I think the next slide I would like to talk about is really talking about what can we do to better help assist in recruiting talent. So we know it starts with the education, but it also starts with really getting a globally competitive workforce. It's really the quality of the education and the training opportunities, not just in K-12, not just in the universities, but the lifelong learner. So we need to look at alternative types of education. I talked a little bit about IT Academy, but it's hybrid learning, online learning, choice for K-12. It's the ability for every single student to be able to have access to education anytime, anywhere, and how they want it. Your example with the iPads is great. We're highly focused right now on digital inclusion. Microsoft's program for digital inclusion is called Shape the Future. Just last month, our worldwide vice president, Anthony Salcido, was featured in Forbes magazine launching our digital inclusion initiative called Shape the Future, where we will be providing over 1 million devices in partnership, again, the public-private partnership with broadband partners such as Comcast into underserved communities. So it doesn't matter the device, whether it's an iPad or the preferred Windows 8 tablet, it doesn't matter. We agree that it is truly the digital inclusion that makes the difference. And it's not just that education piece. The economic impact that digital inclusion makes is exponential. We are funding 20 economic impact studies at the state and community level. We would love to do one, whether in the county or at the state here, with a strong industry partner, the Arnold Group, to look at it. Because when you look at bringing a device into a home who has not had that device, the impact is just incredible. Now you might have multi-generational folks that have access to that device. There's access to health and human services they may not have had, employment search, etc. So when you look at over the lifetime of that student who brings that device into the home, it's just incredible. Fourth, I think we wanted to talk about what are some of the other states doing that could potentially be interesting to the state of California. So I wanted to talk mostly about these states. A lot of the programs center on what I talked about already a little bit with IT Academy. So in the state, my home state of Washington, we also were able to launch IT Academy in partnership with our Department of Ed. It's the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction in Washington State. So Superintendent Randy Dorn really led the effort. There was some legislative funding, but it was also matched by Microsoft. So it's in the biennium for 2 years. Every single high school in the state will have access to all 1,500 courses. They will also have every single lab outfitted with all of the software required, every single virtual environment that may be needed. So if you're a student and you've taken the basic certifications, I'm an office specialist, I have some design, web design, and now I want to tackle SQL Server programming, you're probably not going to have access to a SQL Server in your living room. But these virtual environments allow the students to have that real life experience. In addition, we're doing train the trainer deployment. We're doing what we're calling the Microsoft Innovative Educator Training. So we really believe that that professional development piece is very key. So our hopes is that this will reach all 1 million students in the state of Washington. The example in Michigan is called Career Forward. And actually, a couple years ago when I was here, I talked a little bit about that. But it's still just as relevant because we're seeing this happen in more and more states. So I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 years ago, Michigan passed legislation that actually required an online course requirement for all high school graduates. Microsoft partnered with the state of Michigan Department of Ed, as well as Michigan Virtual High School, to create online curriculum. This is now free and available for any state, any school system, any district that would like to use that. In Idaho, they just passed an initiative called Students Come First. This has a funding aspect as well as a digital inclusion aspect. So we're looking at, can we leverage that career forward curriculum that exists, it's free, potentially white label it, put Idaho's Students Come First name on it, and deliver it for free. Because to be honest, the districts are really scared. Here's this online course requirement for their students that they have to fund, and a typical online course can cost up to $300-400 per student. So all of a sudden, if we can help give them free courseware for their students, that's a huge relief, so you don't have the districts really battling some of this legislation. Utah has passed some truly groundbreaking legislation that changes that funding policy. So it allows for choice. So all of a sudden, the district doesn't own every dollar for that student. The student has the funding, so if they want to take an AP course from even another state, from a virtual high school, they have the ability to do that. So it really opens up the anytime, anywhere learning and the right learning for that student. And finally, Virginia also, I'm sure my time's getting short, is very similar. They were actually the first state to do the statewide IT Academy. So finally, I want to just really say that it is truly the private-public partnerships. Microsoft we spend every second of every day, a huge part of us. There are over about 5,000 people of our 90,000 people that think every single day about education in some capacity, whether it's Microsoft Research, whether it's putting the education relevance into the products, whether it's people on my team that are out there every day talking and working with the schools and the universities. But this is just a sampling of some of the programs that we have, and these programs are, in the most part, entirely free. One that I want to just call attention to,
And
in closing, is Elevate Veterans. We just announced this, that the IT Academy will be made available for all of our returning veterans, and it will be putting $2 million in cash, $6 million in software to allow vouchers for all of our veterans to really be retooled and take advantage of that IT Academy. So with that, a heartfelt thank you to allow Microsoft to be here. It's very important. We really appreciate the conversation and dialogue. And thank you.
Thank you very much, and you do such a great job and a very good job of answering the questions that I've posed, and my staff and I have put together, and really appreciate it. I'm going to try and stay on time, so just have maybe one question to ask. And that would be, in your opinion, what does California need to do to better assist companies in recruiting talent from within California so that our students are thoroughly prepared for job market demands of today and tomorrow?
I think that it goes back to, we do these tours, Bill Gates, Craig Mendy, they do them all the time. We're just not graduating enough computer science engineers or mathematicians or scientists, and we know it, and yet we're not doing it. So we're having to fill the gap with visas. So I think it's really truly that alignment and figuring out, and somebody made the point, it doesn't just start, you can't all of a sudden take a college freshman and say you need to become a computer science major.
It starts in elementary school.
Exactly. So it's figuring out, DigiGirls is one of the programs we're really working on. Let's find those programs
a wonderful program
that engage the youth and get them interested at that time so they see that future ahead.
If when I talk to people and I say, oh, I majored in mathematics and I was a high school math teacher, many times, the majority of times, people will say, oh, I was never good at math. And what I say was, well, maybe you didn't have a good math teacher. And by that, I explain maybe you didn't have someone who had enough training in that area.
You just, and I promise I won't talk too long, you hit on a whole nother topic, is that whole alternative alternative way to become certified. We are piloting what we call TEALs. It's to put professionals into the classrooms.
Right.
So that we are saying, okay, whether it's Microsoft or whoever, you are a professional mathematician, you can engage kids, can you go into the class from 7 to 9 a.m.?
Right.
So
and
really help get that expertise.
I have legislation that I'll be introducing in January that will help both teachers who have lost their jobs as well as people from the private sector to receive a certificate training so we can get them into schools and teach math and science.
Fantastic. So we're entirely on board. Oh, and CSU East Bay, I just want to throw that out, has a fantastic program for that too.
Well, that's
for
good to
retraining
know.
Professionals. Yes.
Great.
So talk to CSU East Bay.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce the second panel and invite our second panelist, Professor Mark Warschauer. He is Professor of Education and Informatics at the University of California, Irvine, where he also directs both the Digital Learning Lab and the PhD in Education program. He is one of the world's top experts on the integration of technology in education. I want to thank you for coming up from Irvine. We really, really appreciate it. You have 15 minutes, and after that, I believe we will have 15 minutes for questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Alquist, Assemblywoman Campos, Assemblyman Fong, and all the invited guests here. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I used to be a high school mathematics teacher, too.
We've bonded, okay.
Newcomer High School in San Francisco, a Spanish bilingual high school teacher back in the days when we had those. So, let's see how this works here. If we're serious about preparing students for the future, we must consider the findings of economists Murnane and Levy, who analyzed changes in the U.S. job market over a 30-year period. Of 5 categories, there has been a dramatic increase in demand for jobs requiring expert thinking and complex communication. In contrast, there's been a dramatic decrease in demand for jobs based on routine or non-routine manual labor or routine cognitive tasks. Indeed, routine cognitive skills are those that are in least demand in today's knowledge economy, yet those are precisely the skills that our schools are most focusing on today. So how then can we better teach expert thinking and complex communication in our schools? Research suggests there are 4 critical elements. First, students need to access and understand the widest amount of educational content. With the quantity and quality of scientific information doubling almost every 10 years, it's no longer sufficient for students to memorize information from a few seldom updated textbooks. Students need to explore, combine, and analyze information from a wide variety of up-to-date texts and documents. Second, in a knowledge economy, students need to write and write well. Studies indicate that even engineers typically spend 30, 40, 50, or up to 70% of their time writing, an amount that increases with the responsibility of the position. And virtually all serious writing is done digitally these days. Third, students need opportunities for construction to build their own models, plans, projects, and designs. There's no better way to develop innovative leaders for the future than by giving people chances to create and innovate in childhood. And computers are a valuable tool in this process. Finally, students need to engage with a community of peers and mentors. This is precisely how our most privileged and motivated youths learn outside of school, by joining communities online where they interact with experts from around the world. We need to bring these same kinds of networking opportunities into the classroom. Considering these 4 goals, and how much each of them is assisted by the use of new technologies, the benefits of digital media in schools become evident. Yet computers on their own do not make you smart any more than a stove on its own makes you healthy. Rather, in both cases, the benefits depend on the ingredients. And there are 4 essential ingredients to improving education with technology: infrastructure, curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. Starting with infrastructure, we have to find a way to provide an internet-connected digital device whether a laptop, netbook, tablet, or web device, to all learners, at least once they reach upper elementary grades and are capable of autonomous learning with diverse academic content. Sharing one computer among 4 to 5 students today, as is typically done in California schools, makes about as much sense as sharing one pencil among 5 learners would have made when I was growing up. The only real question is whether we can afford such one-to-one access, and I'll come back to that later. Digital textbooks and curricula represent another important element of infrastructure. Digital materials are not only less expensive than printed ones, but are more flexible, updatable, and interactive. And I was very glad to hear you, Senator Alquist, talk about open source and open educational resources, such as the Silicon Valley-based CK12 organization, which produces free digital textbooks that meet California standards and can be downloaded, remixed, or edited, and include links to extra materials, animations, and videos. And I'm going to be visiting them this afternoon to talk about a joint project we're working on. Other open educational resources are available online, including inquiry-based science learning environments. Digital curricula also make possible better support for English learners and struggling readers, such as the Live Ink program, which automatically converts material from traditional block text formats such as this to a syntactically organized, cascaded format that better matches how the eyes and brain process information. Other elements of infrastructure include new cloud-based tools such as Google Apps for Education, freely accessed from any web-connected device to facilitate individual or collaborative writing, data analysis, and interaction, and a wide variety of affordable apps to meet the needs of diverse learners, such as iAnnotate, which is being used from medical schools to middle schools to promote more active student engagement with texts, to Proloquo to Go, which assists communication for children with special needs, such as my own son. As for curriculum, we need to move beyond basic skills to develop adaptive expertise. An emphasis on inquiry and innovation without building a foundation of specific skills and knowledge is useless, as it only leads to frustration among learners. However, a focus on specific skills and knowledge without inquiry and innovation is limited as well, as it focuses exclusively on the kinds of routine cognitive abilities that are losing importance in the job market. Adaptive expertise combines the mastery of specific skills and knowledge with the ability to rethink and repurpose them in innovative ways. Well, how do we do that? One example of such an innovative curriculum works toward adaptive expertise involves robotics. Now, robotics is getting very popular in California and elsewhere, but it typically involves youth teams participating in competitions, but that are organized in extracurricular activities outside of schools. And not all of our youths have opportunities, have the funding, et cetera, to participate in those extracurricular activities. So Dos Pueblos High School in Santa Barbara has taken this further by integrating robotics within its innovative engineering academy. This has required a serious reworking of the curriculum. So, for example, students there, instead of taking separate one-year courses in physics, engineering, and art, now take an integrated 3-year interdisciplinary course in physics, engineering, and art, which allows better integration of theory and practice throughout, as students earn partial credit in each subject each year. So within this 3-year course, rather than being rushed to cover all the material for the test in 1 year, they have opportunities to go back and forth between theory and practice and integrate a lot of applied work. So, for example, they do major projects such as a collaborative design and construction of a large kinetic sculpture for community organization. Then in their senior year, they participate in a 1-year robotics competition in which they take both theoretical and applied courses that guide them in the design of robots. Issues of new curriculum are closely connected with pedagogy. At King Middle School in Maine, all instruction is carried out through 3 annual 8 to 12-week interdisciplinary projects, which are jointly planned by teams of math, science, social studies, and language arts teachers. The projects, called learning expeditions, involve collaborative inquiry on thematic issues, leading to sophisticated products, including both student writing and new media development. Examples include a CD on endangered animals that 8th grade students produced and was shared throughout the state, and a digital printed book sharing the stories of civil rights leaders in Maine. Standardized test scores are far above the norm at the school, even though it has the highest percentage of English learners of any school in the state. Now, neither of these two schools make computers the object of learning. Rather, computers and other digital media become tools in knowledge production, just as they are for adults in universities and professional life. In other words, these schools are not teaching hammer, they are teaching carpentry. And teachers in these new digital classrooms must play a variety of roles as orchestrators, designers, editors, lecturers, mentors, coaches, and evaluators. Some people are arguing that computers are replacing the need for good teachers, but our own research suggests that the effective integration of digital media and learning requires very well-prepared teachers. Finally, we get to what is arguably the most important ingredient of all, assessment, and one that needs a great deal of improvement. By analogy, let us consider another kind of assessment for driving. We actually have two driving tests, a multiple choice driving test on driving rules and a road test. You have to pass both. In our schools, though, we typically only have the first of these, the multiple choice test, but we lack the actual performance assessment. Real road tests for learning would require application of knowledge through in-depth thinking and communication. For example, to assess the ability to analyze data, we could have 12th grade students interpret data on the spread of the H1N1 infection on each continent over 12 months and prepare a website or a newspaper article for a public audience that explains spread rates in relation to seasonal variations or travel patterns or government policies. Now let's see how assessment fits in with technology use in schools. Returning to the driver's test example. If the only test required for a driver's license was the multiple choice test, we wouldn't need any technology in driver's ed. We wouldn't need cars. We wouldn't even need simulators because they would be useless to prepare people to take this multiple choice test. Well, but if we actually want to teach people to drive, we need those tools. Well, the same thing is taking place in schools. If really our only goal is to work on these multiple choice tests, people say, well, what do we need technology for that? But if we're teaching actually people to perform academically, to construct experiments, to analyze data, to carry out authentic research, to write compelling papers, then we need access to the tools for that, the hardware, the software, and online networks. Finally, in addition to making assessment more performative, we need to make it more formative to provide consistent feedback on student performance and opportunities to improve. And there's no better tool for that than digital media, as exemplified by this e-textbook produced by Houghton Mifflin for the iPad, which provides fast automatic scoring of student quizzes together with links to in-depth explorations of how students' problems can be solved, while communicating all of this to students and teachers. Now let's quickly look at two examples, because not all schools get these four ingredients right. In Birmingham, Alabama, in 2009, they distributed 15,000 low-cost EXO laptops to students as part of the international one laptop per child program. The Birmingham program was initiated by the former mayor who believed, as did the founders of the OLPC program, Nicholas Negroponte, that if we only give students laptops and get out of the way, they'll do amazing things. So they didn't budget anything for internet access, curriculum development, teacher training, or even computer maintenance. And while the laptops were received enthusiastically, the results were very disappointing. The tiny EXO laptops were difficult to use by teachers who had little incentive, training, or support tools, such as servers, projectors, or internet access. They started breaking down quickly, and no money was budgeted to fix them. Within 18 months, the majority of the laptops no longer functioned, and the program was abandoned. In contrast, Saugus Union School District started its one-to-one program with a more focused intervention in fourth grade classes. Students were provided low-cost netbooks, but carefully chosen ones that were easy to maintain. An open-source software platform was developed that made support and update of all applications painless and provided an easy-to-use interface for teachers and students. The netbooks were incorporated in support of a curricular initiative designed to improve student writing. Teachers were trained, appropriate infrastructure was developed, wireless access was provided, a district-wide wireless writing environment including blogs and wikis and specialized software was provided. As a result, the netbooks were used extensively. The program was very well regarded by stakeholders. Test scores have gone up steadily, and the greatest gains have occurred among Hispanics, English learners, and students from low-cost families. That brings us to the last point, which is whether we can afford this all. Saugus, for example, is using netbooks with an open source operating system that cost, together with maintenance, about $300 per machine over a 4-year period, or $75 per student. Together with all other expenses, the total comes to about $130 per student per year. Programs with laptops, such as with Macintosh laptops, such as the program in Maine, cost about $242 per year, which also includes warranty, software, wireless infrastructure, online learning system, staff developments. Programs with iPads, for example, would probably cost somewhere in between. A number of districts are now using bring-your-own-device programs, which sound like they're unfair, but actually not quite, because students are allowed to bring their own devices, but the school provides devices to students who are not able to bring them. So the limited resources that the schools have can be more effectively targeted and used. Many of these programs cost less than $50 per student per year. On the other hand, there can be substantial savings due to lower cost digital textbooks, lower photocopying costs, reduction of paperwork, simplified student data mapping, use of online assessment, and other factors. One group, Project Red, estimated very substantial savings. I don't know on a national basis. We haven't done the calculation for California, but I think if this is looked into at a statewide level, we could actually build programs that are very cost effective. My last slide. So in conclusion, with science and technology necessary for basic manufacturing now spread throughout the world, the U.S. can no longer compete on the basis of making and selling basic commodities. Rather, our competitive edge comes from how well we produce products, services, and technologies that are new, special, and non-standard. The values of these projects doesn't come principally from the material or labor that go into them, but from their innovative design. That is the story of success of Apple Incorporated, of so many other companies in Silicon Valley that have helped make California the 8th biggest economy in the world. But using Apple as an example, no matter how brilliant Steve Jobs was, I have a feeling that if he had grown up anywhere else but Silicon Valley, he may not have become such a great technology entrepreneur. That's because his early experiences working with technology, such as when a neighbor who worked at Hewlett-Packard brought jobs to the company for lectures, activities, hands-on projects, were critical to his intellectual and career development.
And in closing?
So not every young person is fortunate enough to have these kinds of mentorship experiences outside of school, but we can ensure that all students have the experiences of innovative learning with technology in schools. Such is the path required to help keep our state and nation great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The information was so interesting. I hated to say that we were out of time. We have about 9 minutes left for questions. I have 2 in particular I would like to ask, and perhaps my colleagues have something also. The first one, you mentioned part of this, but if you could spend a little more time for another minute or two. What curricula, framework, and teacher training changes are needed to implement this learning media? And then I have another question also.
Sure. One thing in particular, you have to start with the end in mind. A lot of the programs that fail, such as the one in Birmingham, start with the idea of, let's just get the computers out to the kids. The program, the exact curricula will depend in the grade level, the place, etc. I personally think writing is a very critical skill, and one that we've seen from our own research is best taught with new technologies. STEM is actually a critical area, but again, as we saw from this program in Santa Barbara, it's not just a matter of pouring information into kids' heads. Even our best classes, our AP classes, are based on, covering material. How much material can you cover? We need to, instead of covering material, we need to uncover material. We need to really get at the kind of the in-depth meaning of things.
So
for teacher training,
you need to understand what your goal is. If your goal is to have students think critically,
exactly.
It's not about X number of computers in the classroom. But go on, you were going to say more.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the exact point. What are the ends in mind? We want our youth to be able to write well. We want them to be able to conduct experiments. We want them to be able to analyze and interpret experiments. We want them to be able to engage in in-depth research projects. We start with those goals in mind. We devise the assessments with those in mind, and then the curricular and the tools follow. But I think we will find that just like for adults, no adult carries out that kind of knowledge production without digital media. It doesn't happen in schools either.
Thank you. My second question, and I do, my Senate district is almost 1 million people, and it's Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, 55% of San Jose, and then Gilroy. I read that there's a new study conducted here in California that shows that the Latino community college students lag behind white students in online course grades. That was Raymond Culp, Cabrillo College. The study points to the importance of personal relationships in Latino culture and how lack of access to a professor can limit the learning experience of an online course. What are your thoughts, Professor Warshauer, about this, and how can we adjust for the cultural differences in an online world?
Yeah, I'm not one of those one of those people who believes that the solution to our problems is to shut down classrooms and put all kids online, because you see that the best schools that people point to that are making use of media are doing a lot of hands-on projects, activities, group work, etc. So we need to think of blended learning spaces. We need to think of supported learning spaces. For example, one of the projects one of my doctoral students was working on, they were doing a study of giving online access to AP and advanced computer science courses, precisely in low-income communities. And the first year, when they did that purely online, the students were dropping out and not performing very well. The next year, when they created blending and learning environments where the students were actually getting in-person support, they did much better. So I think the solution is not to see online learning as a replacement for schools, but to integrate it in a blended way.
Great. Thank you so much. Mr. Fong, Assembly Member Fong, Assembly Member Campos? Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Excellent presentation.
Okay. Now we have the third panel. We have two people in the third panel here. So I guess real panel then, since there are two people. Manny Barbara is the Vice President of Advocacy and Thought Leadership at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. Brett Barley is the Associate Director of Education and Health Policy at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Welcome.
Thank you, and very happy to be here on behalf of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. I'm also, excuse me?
We have 10 minutes for
10 minutes.
Guest.
I'll be ready to go. And I'm also, as you know, retired superintendent from the Oak Grove School District for 10.5 years, and I will try to respond to the questions that I was given relative to that experience, to the new experience working in a nonprofit corporate world.
Thank you.
So a little bit about the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. Our focus is to prepare students for post-secondary success, which we define as completion of the UC-CSU A to G requirements And we do it through a combination of direct program assistance, which I'll go through in just a second, and also advocacy on behalf of specific issues, especially pertaining to the A to G requirements as the default curriculum at the high school level. We do it through a STEM focus, so those are the lens that we do our work. We focus specifically on algebra in 8th grade and biology in 9th grade as far as our direct programs are concerned. And also we have an equity focus, because if we do not increase the performance of our students of color in the STEM-related fields, we are not going to meet the goals that were mentioned relative to needs in the future for college success. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our programs. The initiatives that we currently have underway in terms of direct service, we have a Stepping Up to Algebra program where we are focusing on students successfully completing grade 8 algebra. That is a critical gateway course to future completion of A to G and success in STEM, specifically completion of Algebra 2, which seems to be a critical course in terms of future, not only entry into the university, but more importantly, graduating from university. We have our program as a 75-hour program during the summer and with support during the year. On Saturdays, we front load the curriculum, preparing students who would not be going into the algebra, grade 8 algebra, and preparing them to go into algebra in 8th grade. The reason we focused on this area, and just a little bit quick on the data, in Santa Clara County, 47% of our grade 8 students successfully complete algebra according to the state testing, proficient and advanced. But this is how it breaks down. 73% Asian, 54% white, 23% Hispanic. And that 23%, by the way, is a 5% increase over last year. Is even worse last year. So if we don't do something with that population, we're not going to be successful in terms of ultimately graduating students ready for college. The 35% A to G requirement that was mentioned a little while ago breaks down to the low 20% for the Latino population in the county. The Algebra 2 pass rate in Santa Clara County is 8% for the Hispanic populations. That's what we're dealing with, and that's why we really focus on this area. I don't think so either. We agree on that. And we're trying to do something about it. In our program, we integrated technology in our program. We included the Mind Institute program that is a math program that does not require any language. And we also utilized the Khan Academy this summer as well, and we're also using it in our Saturday intervention program to allow for more differentiation for student work. It's open source. It's free. I mean, I can take out my cell phone and pull it down and review integers or polynomials, whatever I need to do. And so we're trying to make that available to the students to help differentiate their own learning. We also have a Stepping Up to Science program in support of the Eastside High School District adoption of the A to G requirements. This is a front-loading program for students entering biology in 4 of the lowest socioeconomic high schools in the Eastside Union School District. I should mention that for most of these students, if not all, have never had a hands-on lab science experience. So it's pretty difficult to expect them to go into biology and be successful without that. So this program is a combination front-loading lab experience for the students with professional development for the science teachers as well. We're funded with a grant from Texas Instruments, formerly National Semiconductor. The goal is to have all science teachers in Eastside to receive the professional development in teaching science in the gradual release of responsibility method over the next 3 years. In terms of the resources, we have on our site Lessonopoly, which is an open source site of free lesson plans that teachers can access. We try to focus specifically on STEM-related areas. The curriculum that we've developed in combination with Eastside High School and the County Office of Education, our Stepping Up to Algebra curriculum and our STEPS, our Stepping Up to Science curriculum, has been loaded on site, so it's available for everyone open source, and it's intended to be a resource for educators to get free open source lesson plans to help them in terms of their lesson planning. We also have about to be launched, this is thanks to a grant that we received some help from IBM. It's a STEM website, and the intent with this website would be sort of a one-stop shopping where if people want to get information about programs in STEM, they'll be able to access it. And also posting research. We already have 100 research documents loaded on there. So if someone wants to look up a document or specific research in this area, they'll be able to access it. And this should be launched within the next couple of months for educators and really anyone who wants to access the site. The current initiatives and partnerships, we have a partnership with Converge, with TechNet from Washington, back east. Notice they were mentioned in your brochure. As part of the Converge US effort, our area of focus is in STEM. We are creating a STEM innovation hub led by my colleague Amy Wong, who is the director of STEM integration. The idea is to bring people together, bring all these great programs that we're hearing today, and what we try to do is try to bring these programs and connect them to the school system itself, because there is a little bit of a gap there in terms of how do people become aware of all these programs. So this will be underway this year. We also started STEM Integration Club, or a roundtable as we're beginning to call it now, of bringing programs together that we're familiar with in the area, school districts that have STEM programs, bringing them together so they could share information and share their ideas. And there are others, of course, in the area that we mentioned. Los Altos has had piloted the Khan Academy. Anderson School used the Mind Institute in the Moreland School District, and the professor from Irvine here already have gone through some of this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that area. Some of the technology challenges, the varying resources. Cupertino is not Alum Rock. Wide differences in resources available, not only within the school system itself, but in terms of what those students have available when they go home. When we went to observe the Khan Academy in Los Altos, it was fabulous. They're nice white computers, have them available at home. One of the challenges that we faced when we were using the Khan Academy in our summer program, a lot of the students did not have access to that at home, so we had to actually make it available for them at the school itself. And the ongoing sources of funds. One of the challenges I always felt as a superintendent is when you buy technology, you have to have an ongoing source of funds because you have to replace them. And even $100 a student for my former district would amount to a little bit over $1 million. That there's not a lot of discretionary funds that is available for districts to spend that. So it's really right now not a systematic source of funds that districts can access. Knowledge is also an issue. What's available, these terrific programs, and what the schools are aware of. There's a gap there, and we're trying to bring that together, making this information available to the districts, ways that you can extend a day through technology, and to differentiate, which I think are the two most powerful ways that I think technology can be used. Relative, and again in closing here, some of the education and business nexus, we do try to connect the two, the business world and the education world. Microsoft actually helped fund a conference for us this past year called Shift Ed, where we had school programs and schools that were doing some innovative work in the STEM-related areas, presenting it at a conference. But there is some differences between the corporate world, the business world, and education world.
And in closing? In
closing, and this is the critical, business tends to have a just get it done sort of mentality, which is great, but education is a political institution. And I don't know how many times I've had to mention that, no, the county superintendent cannot just tell districts what to do. There's processes in place, there's board of trustees, so it's kind of working on that nexus.
We're talking about a democracy.
Yes, and one of the questions was asked, like difference in measurements. The API is sort of the way that most people measure success. Personally, I think the API can make you look better than you really are, can make you look worse. So I think there's some differences in the way that I think we measure success. We focus more on the actual completion rate of algebra in 8th grade and the successful completion of the A to G requirement. Technology has the potential of being disruptive. There's tremendous possibility in this area, and the challenges are, of course, the widening gap in access to this area between the have and the have-nots. We really have two worlds in Santa Clara County, and the availability of getting resources to the areas where we really need to get them to, so those students are able to keep up with the demands of 21st century learning.
Thank you. We just have a few minutes,
Yeah.
and a lot of the questions, you did a great job, a lot of the questions you already answered, so I'll just have a few comments.
Sure.
One, second year algebra has been the measurement for college success for 10, 20 years probably. That really hasn't changed, and I think my personal reasons for that, thinking that, is one, the content, the logic of it, but even probably more than all of that is the persistence and the discipline. Math is the kind of course where if you don't do your homework one day, if you don't do your homework for a week, you are way behind. And you have to be your own disciplinarian, and you have to be extremely persistent. And I think students need to really understand that persistence and determination have an awful lot to do with success in all forms of education. Question, the Mind Institute that you've referred to 2 or 3 times, is that the Mind Institute in Sacramento, or is that a different Mind Institute? Or
Where they're located, the ones at the program, Irvine.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's the Mind
actually.
Institute in Irvine.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I really
We have
wanted
a really
to
good
understand
program,
that.
and we put good use in
And
it. so.
just maybe 1 or 2 questions really quickly. Okay. Without a doubt, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group has been a tremendous asset in linking the business, technology, and education communities. The proximity of all three, using public-private partnerships, demonstrate entrepreneurship, innovation, and community. How can we export these paradigms to South Central Los Angeles or the Central Valley, where unemployment is as high as 30 to 40% in some of these areas?
So is that for the leadership group or the education foundation?
That's actually for both of you.
Okay, well, we focus on Santa Clara County is our area of our sphere of influence that we're trying to focus on. We are looking to scale our models. Recently, I spoke to Santa Cruz City Schools. They were interested in our stepping up to algebra and the work that we're doing with algebra access. And we're not, we hopefully out of this innovation hub that we're going to be creating, we'll be able to come up with some models that will be scalable throughout the state.
Yeah, because what I'm really thinking is that you do very well. And I would think that some of these other communities might be coming to you
Right.
asking for help, asking for models that they can use in their communities where they are sorely needed.
Right. And we are trying to, through conferences, I've actually speaking of Central Valley, I actually presented to the group of superintendents in the Merced area on some of the work that we're doing. But right now it's more of an outreach when people contact us. But hopefully out of this innovation hub, we'll have some information that we'll be able to scale throughout the state. Okay.
One last question, and you mentioned this. It's about how education and the business sectors view success, and you talked about the API. My real question to you is, now as a professional in the private sector, compared to your time as an educator, how do you think we should be measuring success?
Well, right now the districts are under the constraints of No Child Left Behind. And so the reason that the schools are in a position I just mentioned that, the elementary school district students that are graduating into Eastside without having had any lab experience, because those districts are under so much pressure to meet their performance targets in reading and math that they feel they can't afford to spend time in other areas. So I think we definitely need to broaden the definition of success. It cannot just be a multiple choice test. I think we do need to look at performance measures, and I think whatever is measured is what people will focus on. And I think the key right now is for us to expand our definition of what is success to include, in my opinion, beyond the APIs I mentioned. I think what I would really be taking a look at is the A to G completion rate at the high school level and the algebra completion rate at grade 8. That's what I'm currently focusing now. But I think as we began to expand with more innovative performance assessments, which we hope we will have eventually through the Common Core, I think we'll be able to have more performance type of measures that will really actually mean something. So,
Thank you so much.
Right.
Oh, yes, Ms. Campbell.
First of all, thank you for your presentation, and I think that you bring an interesting perspective coming from the education world and now in the private sector with a foundation that is focusing on education. You talked about in some of your last statements about the fact that our underserved communities, which are predominantly communities of color, predominantly communities that represent the Latino community, and the fact that our children in those communities are not at the same level as some of our other communities that are richer in or wealthier in resources. So my question to you, and you answered some of the senator's questions about the restraints that the education community has in certain within the East Side. What are the things that we need to be striving for so that our communities that are underserved, and our communities are predominantly Latino? I mean, the census has shown that the fastest growing community is the Latino community, which is, whether people want to recognize it or not, is going to be the community that we need to educate for our future workforce. So what, as governing policymakers, as the private sector, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's a conversation that we haven't had. How can we, or what should we be doing to make sure that those communities are actually equipped with the technology and the resources and the tools that they need so that our future workforce can be successful? And I know that you mentioned, but this is really for the students, the STEM integration roundtable, and you have Mount Pleasant there, and you have some other communities that, do those young people get together, or is it within their campus?
We're actually getting the teachers together right now so that they can share ideas in terms of how the instruction is being delivered and the available technology. So these are districts that are trying, Milpitas has a STEM program, Oak Grove, Mount Pleasant, they're trying to do some innovative work, but they're small pieces, they're just small programs. We're trying to get them together to be able to share ideas. And I think in response to your question about what can be done, the first thing is to acknowledge it. I think anytime any kind of data is presented, it has to be disaggregated in that way. You cannot, we have two worlds in Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley. We have people coming from back east sometimes that see Silicon Valley as Palo Alto and Cupertino, which it is, but then there's another world. We spend a lot of focus, our energies in the East Side high school districts and the feeder districts. There's 80,000 students in that system. That's the size of Oakland and San Francisco combined, approximately. And so, and out of that population, 92% of that population are kids of color. So that's where the action has to be if we're going to make a difference. And being able to connect the business and just making people aware so that the resources are there, and trying to bring the resources actually more systemically, because right now it's a little bit hit and miss. To really focus on that area, I think is going to be really, really critical. So.
Well, thank you.
You're
It was
welcome.
a wonderful presentation from the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. Really appreciate it. Next, we have Mr. Barley from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. And you will have 10 minutes, and then we will have questions for 5 minutes.
Great. Let's see here. And thank you all so much for inviting us to present here at this important committee. We're just about ready here, it looks like. Again, I'm Brett Barley, Associate Director of Education and Health Policy at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. What is the Leadership Group? Well, in addition to having a logo that looks very much like NASA's logo, we are a business organization consisting of 350 or so member companies here in Silicon Valley. Folks like Huawei, Cisco, AT&T, and Microsoft, who you see in the room today. These organizations represent about 1 in every 3 private sector jobs in Silicon Valley. And with them, we've had the opportunity to partner with a lot of different education organizations on programs and initiatives. And I was invited here today to describe a couple of those to you. So the first is an Intel Math teacher training program that we have been running for 5 years in Silicon Valley called Silicon Valley, a Laboratory for Learning. And the goal here is really to improve student achievement by focusing on teacher professional development in low socioeconomic schools, focusing on core math content knowledge. We do this through an 80-hour instructional professional development program over the summer, and these courses are aligned to teach teachers how to better serve their students in math up to the algebra level, with also a focus on geometry and arithmetic. So we strongly believe if the teacher is uncomfortable teaching core math concepts, they won't be successful in imparting that knowledge onto their students. The last 2 years, we've piloted and have now fully implemented a 20-hour follow-up session that runs through the fall and into the winter, where teachers that took our program over the summer can participate in a professional learning community to continue to share best practices and how their instruction over the summer has benefited their students in the classroom. What are the results that we've seen so far? Well, we give all of our teachers a pre-test when they start the program and a post-test when they leave. On average, the teachers that we serve come in and they score at about a D. They're in the low 50s on this pre-test. And when they leave, on average, they're scoring about a B+. So they grow by about 30 points over the course of these 80 hours and always tell us that they would like to learn more and continue more if those opportunities were available. So we're very pleased to see that. In the last 5 years, we've trained about 425 teachers here in Silicon Valley. And to put that in perspective, that's about 10% of the Intel Math teachers being trained nationally. So we were one of the first to start it, and we continue to be the biggest provider of this curriculum. So a couple of the questions I was asked to answer today is, why did we pick the Intel Math program? One, it was a very fortuitous timing. Intel was developing a curriculum, and we were interested as an organization, our member companies were interested in becoming more engaged in teacher professional development. So the timing worked out well. What were some of the challenges we faced? Well, there's a couple. One, school districts and their discretionary funds right now, more than ever, are quite limited. And so there's not a lot of professional development opportunities. We had been hoping that this would be a pilot program. It would be adopted by districts and the county office, and we would eventually be able to hand this off to the education system, and they would be able to run it. But with resources being as scarce as they are, we knew that if we did not continue to support this program, it would essentially probably go away. We have a great partnership with the County Office of Education, and that has allowed us to keep this going, but it still requires that our members and the leadership group continue to be actively engaged. It's also a problem, funding again, because districts and the teachers that we serve, sometimes teachers that we will enroll in the program will be pink slipped or laid off before the program starts. So we'll start with an enrollment of maybe 150 teachers, and we'll end with an enrollment of about 120. So we will lose teachers because they are unsure about their job placement the following year. And then second, we need more reliable data on which teachers need this program. So there's no system out there that can tell us Bill, Joe, and Sue could really use some help on their math content knowledge so that they could be better at delivering this instruction to their kids in the classroom. So right now we're relying on our education partners to look inside their schools, to look inside their districts and say, well, here are the people that we think could probably use it, but we don't have any evidence to back up or to prove that these are really the teachers that would be best served by having this program. Potential to expand to other subjects? Yes. We had talked earlier about how we were hoping to pilot this program and hand it off. We have had a science professional development on the back burner for several years that we would love to get off the ground if we knew that there was another organization or the education community could pick up this math teacher training program. But we haven't moved forward because of the funding issues in our local school districts. And teacher reaction. I mentioned that we survey all of our teachers before and after the course, and in addition to this post-test, we also asked them for feedback on the program. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, and because of their feedback, we've implemented these professional learning communities that I mentioned earlier. They wanted more time to engage with their peers and talk about what they had learned over the summer. The second initiative I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, or still this morning, is the Industry Initiatives for Science and Math Education. We commonly refer to this as ISME, a wonderful little acronym. So ISME is another summer teaching fellowship that we provide to teachers here in Silicon Valley. And since 1985, about 40 Silicon Valley Leadership Group companies have been providing one or multiple fellowships to teachers. The goal of this effort is really to place K through 16 teachers into a business setting that works in the science, engineering, technology, math field so that they can better understand the skills that their students are going to need when they enter the workplace. So these teachers enter the field, they are given a project, they see what professionals in the field are doing, and they can take that knowledge back to their classroom and use it to inform their instruction. So what does this summer program look like? Well, one, it's full-time for 8 weeks. We're not expecting these teachers to volunteer their time. Through the generosity of our member companies, they receive a stipend over the summer of about $8,000. They really do focus on how their skills can transfer back to the classroom while working on a project for the company, so it's a mutually beneficial exchange. And over the last 27 years, we've placed almost 3,000 teachers in about 650 schools and 122 school districts. When you break that down, that's about 2 million kids now being served by teachers that have gone through this program, 35% of which are low socioeconomic. A couple success stories from the program. Sujatha designed a project to engage her students at Rolling Hills Middle School, that's in Los Gatos, in the chemistry involved in a crime scene. After learning about chromatography, fingerprinting, and acid-based indicators, their students were presented with a crime scenario where 6 teachers were labeled suspects in a robbery. Students nailed the criminal, finding clues and performing experiments on them. Sujatha was able to incorporate some of the techniques she mastered during her fellowship at Christopher Chidsey's research lab at Stanford University. So that was a fun one, a nice project that they got to do. A second was Stephanie, who developed an education transfer plan on computer maintenance, working as a member of the computer repair services management team at Lockheed Martin's computer system. They're one of our biggest supporters, about 20 teachers a year. She gained the skills necessary to develop a computer lab at her school and then developed a curriculum for her students at Elmhurst Middle School in Oakland, where she helped them decipher how computers work. So before the school had only been focusing on software, she created a hardware aspect of this curriculum where they were essentially the tech support for the school, and they got class credit for that. And then finally, I was asked to talk about what are some strategies that could be used in other regions to forge similar relationships between the business community and the education community. And I would say there's a couple. One, start a conversation. Our member companies are very interested in education and know that education is going to be critical for their continued success. And we know that the education community would love to have more conversations with the business community. So having an organization like ours that can be an umbrella for the education community to come and interact with a number of different businesses who may have a number of different interests is a great starting point. So breaking down those silos is one. 2, find common ground. A couple of the initiatives that I mentioned earlier were about math, STEM, science, and that makes a lot of sense considering that we represent tech companies. Our tech companies know that their students in class today are their future employees, and if they don't have a solid foundation in STEM, they're not going to be able to hire and recruit local talent, and they'll have to spend money recruiting foreign and out-of-state talent. So find common ground. 3, identify potential partnerships. Again, a great example of this are our 2 summer training programs. And then 3, make sure that these initiatives are mutually beneficial. The Intel Math example is a great one. Intel had developed this curriculum. They wanted to roll it out. They needed a place to do that. We were an opportunity for them to use Silicon Valley as a demonstration site for a curriculum that they had developed while improving the content knowledge of teachers in Silicon Valley. Another that I'll mention real quick is recently Wise Technology and Franklin McKinley School District have developed a partnership where Wise Technology has developed a mobile client, think a PDA, an iPhone, or an iPad, that they would like to test as an educational tool. So in Franklin McKinley School District, they found a partner who they could hand off some of these mobile web-based clients to, and the teachers are now using them in classrooms with students for web-based learning and real-time evaluation. Another great example. And then finally, engage in consistent and rigorous evaluation and adapt your strategy when necessary. We report to a board of directors of many different Fortune 500 companies, and if we didn't have metrics to bring back to them about the success that we have with these programs, they would ask us to redirect our resources elsewhere. So just keep good data, make sure that what you're doing is making an impact in students' and teachers' lives, and share that data widely. So thank you again so much for inviting us here to share a little bit about the work that we do. Happy to answer any questions if I haven't taken up too much time.
Thank you so much. Some initial thoughts. One, that assessment piece is so important, and you mentioned how the teachers with the Laboratory for Learning, at the beginning, a lot of them tested out at basically a D level in mathematics and went up to a B or B plus. And I think that's important, very important for teachers, and I think that's very important for students, whether it's K-12 or college, to really, it's easier to measure in university, and we have a bunch of tests K-12, but I think we will see over the years a better way to assess how students are truly learning. It's what Dr. Warshawski was talking about earlier, not just the hammer, but being able to do carpentry, being able to look at the whole environment and to think critically and to apply. Another point on the science, I do hope that, you've had such great success in math, I do hope that you will be able to do more in the science, because I know that's equally important. And then the question that I had also asked of Mr. Barbara is, if it's business, tech, and education, and it's a wonderful collaboration you have, how do you really export that to other places in the state that's sorely needed?
We've been using a lot of what we do here as demonstration sites. So ISME is a prime example of something that started here in Silicon Valley and has now gone statewide. It's great to share success stories through word of mouth. Our member companies don't just have branches here in Silicon Valley, they have branches all over the state. So a Lockheed Martin that takes 20 ISME teachers a year can call the Lockheed Martin branch down in Southern California and say, hey, we're participating in this terrific program. I would invite you and encourage you to participate as well and provide your local Los Angeles teachers with the same type of summer professional development. We're also involved with regional business organizations from across the state and across the country, and on phone calls once a month, we share things that we're doing. Another thing that we would like to do is we would like to put ourselves out of business, essentially. We don't want to have to be the organization that provides teacher professional development, so we will work with legislators to carry legislation that will provide additional funding for districts to do this type of work. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We will pilot things and spin them off, and then once we know what works, we will work with all of you good folks in Sacramento to see that they become law.
Thank you. One question I forgot to ask when I was talking about the Laboratory for Learning. What are the the core goals of the development and strategy courses?
So we know that many of our teachers come into the program frightened of math or having not taken a math class since high school in many cases. In their credential program, they may have taken an instructional delivery course on mathematics, but nothing content-based. So we would really like to refamiliarize them with math content and give them the confidence that they need to deliver that instruction to their students in a manner that will prepare those students to be successful going forward. A lot of times when you hit algebra, math becomes much more conceptual, and that's where both of our teachers and our students struggle. So if we can equip our teachers to deliver that successfully, we have confidence that our students' success will follow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our fourth panelist is Professor Brian Shea. He is the Vice Chair of the California Teacher Advisory Council, representing the California Council on Science and Technology. I want to thank you for coming up from San Diego. We appreciate it. And we have 10 minutes for your presentation and then 5 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for having me up here, Senator Alquist. I really appreciate the honor. Sorry to correct you, I'm actually not a professor. I teach high school mathematics. So I'm still there, even though you two have moved into bigger, better things, I'm still there teaching high school mathematics. So I'm here representing the CCST, California Council on Science Technology.
I would say perhaps a harder position.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps.
And also the California Teacher Advisory Council. So about the councils in particular, they represent all the big universities, big and small throughout California, public and private, and they also represent all the major technical industries here housed in California. With regards to the teacher arm of it, which I'm in the vice chair of, we have teachers that are all walks of avenues of California education. One of our people just got the presidential award this past year. One of our people is now currently on sabbatical working with Senator Kristen Gillibrand from New York in D.C. Other people have won numerous awards throughout the state for Teachers of the Year, or nationally board certified teachers. So I'm among these group of teachers, and we advise the Council on Science Technology as well as the legislature on the teacher's point of view, the practicing teacher's point of view for policy and movements. And so in particular, we were commissioned by the state legislature, by a bicameral and bipartisan group of legislatures about 2 years ago to create a roadmap for the innovation of California and what needs to be worked on to bring California back to being the forefront of national and international success. And so I'm going to focus on the Purple Report, which is all about the education aspect of our commission's report. And this was delivered, in fact, this past August at the Capitol by a robot operated remotely from Santa Barbara, powered by a doctor there. It's used actually to help run procedures and work with students, and patients. And so the report was delivered by a robot in Sacramento in August to the legislature. A few of your colleagues are probably up there, as you might have noticed. And so there are a few of the action items in this report that you all have a copy of I'm going to highlight. And a lot of it you've heard from my colleagues throughout the course of the day. The big things that we focused on and that we created this report is all about public and private partnerships. The report was written through a series of focus groups throughout the state of California. Within these focus groups were teachers, professors, and entrepreneurs and scientists and active members of the business community. And it was written to prepare professionals to help educate the legislature on what we feel is necessary to help propel the education to the next century, the next movements. And so some of the big highlights, 4 big major points are, as you can see right there, the classroom environment, changing how we teach math or science or any classroom environment, which you've heard a lot about today, the teacher's role, what the teacher does, which again, you've heard a lot of these today, the infrastructure, what needs to change within the schools to make this work, and some partnerships in particular, some specific partnerships that we address throughout this report. And so I'm going to focus on these a little bit more in detail for a little while. And so in particular, the classroom environment. You heard a lot of my colleagues talk about that the digital education is the future. And so the way we need to work with that is we need to have it integrated with what I teach on a day-to-day basis and also using mobile technologies. My school district in particular is actually embracing, oddly enough, the use of iPhones, iPads, and Facebook. Our district is encouraging us to use and create Facebook groups to network with our students outside of our normal classroom environment. Maybe put prompts to think about in the course of their readings tonight before we talk about it tomorrow. Or give them a heads up that there's an event happening in the community. There's a talk at the university, or there's a cultural event that might be relevant to a Spanish class down in another part of town. Go check it out. And there's a great liaison to engage students, to have them thinking about education and learning outside of our 40-minute, 90-minute, 2-hour block together. And so it's a different way that reaches the way that they like to learn using social media. The teacher needs to learn how to use this technology. So changing how we learn to teach, since I've only been teaching about 11 years now, but a lot has changed in the past 11 years. And so I've had to further my instruction on how to use technology, how to use the iPads or other tablets, how to use websites like the Khan Academy, which I've occasionally pointed students to use as to help enforce what they're learning in class. In fact, as our classes get bigger and bigger, mine are currently at around 40-ish, I need to find other ways of differentiating instruction to my students, because it's impossible to reach all 40. They're all at completely different places in their learning continuum. And so having additional resources like the embracing the use of mobile devices and technology helps reach the students who need a little bit more time, and I'm too strapped to handle that technically, perhaps at moments. The infrastructure is a big key. A lot of schools, as we heard, only have one computer for 4 students, maybe one computer for 40 students. So the need to have schools wired and wirelessly engaged and attached to the internet, and having more access to smaller mobile devices with easier footprints and maintaining them. So the report goes in particular talking about certain legislation that currently exists right now that actually is hindering the embracing of technology. And so part of the actions of the purple report you have talks about remove this particular ed code if possible, because it's slowing back districts from embracing technology and mobile devices. In fact, my school board intentionally adopted some new ordinances this year to embrace the use of cell phones in classroom so that students can use it as a tool rather than, hopefully, a distraction. And that's hard to do as an educator, to allow students to play around with their phone. I can't keep track of what they're doing. So my goal as an educator is to try to make class as engaging and rich as possible so they're not looking at that to text or surf, but they're using it as a tool to find something related to what I might be talking about or what we're talking about as a group. And finally, public-private partnerships. There's quite a few that are burgeoning out there in the community, some being CSLNet and TechNet. These were created not too long ago through some state legislator movements to encourage public schools and teachers to network with private partnerships and with private companies. We even talked about, we had some symposiums last year about creating an e-harmony of sorts for what teachers need and what companies can provide, because we don't know what you guys can do and you may not know what I need in my classroom. And there could be we could create another avenue to engage and support that. So creating this group of people to coordinate these connections, because many private companies have lots of money and time and don't know where to put it. And we would love time and money, and we don't know how to ask for it as an educator. And so fostering those dialogues is really the key. And you've heard my other panelists talk about that throughout the course of the day. You've also heard a lot of them talking about the standards. I was lucky enough to serve on the Academic Content Standards Commission a year ago, and I helped write the new state standards that are based upon the Common Core standards. And they're kind of not fully implemented yet. And so that part of that is that these states, the standards were adopted, but they haven't been fully implemented because the frameworks aren't there. The assessments aren't clearly defined yet. And so teachers don't know what to teach, the old stuff or the new stuff. And so we need to fully implement these new standards. Fortunately, the governor signed AB 250, which was all about that, but still the balls haven't been rolling yet. There's no groups formed to write what are called frameworks and assessment frameworks. And with the new assessments that are nationwide, there are actually plans to have them be performance-based, which I think my colleague from Irvine talked about, so that students will have the opportunity with their state assessments to do performance tasks in mathematics and English language arts, perhaps. There's also a movement to create nationwide science standards for K-12. And as you've heard a few of us talking about, that there's a lack of science in elementary school and not a whole lot of science in middle school right now. Even though the state standard exists, they've kind of been less taught as regularly because of other emphases. So if we could if California can join the writing of these new science state standards and national state standards for science, we can have a greater stake in that. In fact, Oakland Unified now mandates instructional minutes in science for K-12. And that's a model that Silicon Valley and all throughout the state should really adopt. If Oakland can do it, there's no reason why the rest of California can do it, because Oakland has a very diverse population, and they've managed to find time and importance of mandating science in elementary grades. A few other points that I want to talk about with regards to the standards and ed code. The new state standards do, in fact, embrace the idea of problem solving, which we heard a few people talk about. In fact, one of the new state standards is called perseverance in problem solving, which the senator talked about. Mathematics is all about perseverance. And one of the new math standards is called perseverance in problem solving. And so it ties beautifully into what students need to do in industry and in community and college, into what we should be teaching in high school and elementary mathematics. And if the tests are more focused on this idea of problem solving, then we will be able to teach it better and have a need to teach it. Right now, the tests don't talk about problem solving, so teachers don't teach problem solving because we have to raise test scores. And that's just, unfortunately, the nature of the beast.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It's awful. And so with these new state standards and eventually these new assessments, hopefully we can start engaging more problem-solving skills. Another big thing is the changing, ideally, of the A through G requirements. As a high school teacher, kids have very little wiggle room in their schedule because they feel the need to take all these A through G requirements, which may or may not be relevant in the new industries and the new technologies in the future. So maybe they need to be revamped. Maybe the legislature and the universities can work together in creating and revising the A through G requirements. They haven't been revised in quite a while. So maybe it's time to relook at these requirements for entry into college and to see what really needs to be done, what kids really need to be successful in college and outside of college, after college. The biggest thing that needs to happen is the teacher buy-in. Throughout all of this, teachers helped write this purple report. Teachers serve on this Teacher Advisory Council, which I'm vice chair of, and so we regularly engage the teacher's voice. It is important that teachers are involved throughout the process. Teachers were involved with writing the new state standards. They should be involved with the next few steps. Without the teacher buy-in, unfortunately, a lot of things probably will not happen as well as we would like it to. So engaging teachers throughout will help give credo to that need and the strength of these new requirements. I think those are the big ideas. So,
almost out of time.
Yeah. So I think if we could help encourage some of these new legislative ideas to go through, having some specific actions about private partnerships and with the new standards and new assessments, I think there's a lot of things that can be done to help push forward all the ideas you're hearing about throughout the course of the day. And all of these details are in your purple report. So by all means, read them. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me or the Teacher Advisory Council, and we'll gladly support.
You are a true teacher. You answered not only the questions we had asked you to answer for the presentation, but you also answered the questions I was going to ask that were not in the first group of questions. So you answered everything.
I read your mind.
Question, though, the digital access gap between in rural and disadvantaged communities, could you just maybe spend a little more time on what we should be doing in those areas?
There definitely seems to be a lot of gaps with various kinds of communities. Communities like here, we've heard about the two parts of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
There's some that are well connected, some that are not, and that's obviously throughout the entire state. Some are way less connected than others. So there needs to be specific funding and legislature actions put forward to get all students connected wirelessly or wired to
Any
to devices.
suggestions?
I pass a law and find money out of thin air. Unfortunately, I'm a teacher. I don't know all the suggestions, regrettably.
With our ongoing $6 billion debt, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, there needs to be, we need to create an environment where we welcome that, and a lot of school districts don't have that extra funding to do that. So again, if there was a way to find money and support the wiring of schools, that would definitely help. There could be ways of reaching schools remotely with things like a Cisco telepresence or other kind of distant learning environments using where you could maybe reach other communities who don't have access to excellent calculus teacher, because none live in the community, but maybe we could remotely access them through other technologies.
Thank you. And you mentioned some things that the legislature can do. Is there anything else in terms of implementation, regulation, where we need to move forward to help you?
Absolutely. There's a few bills that were just recently signed that we don't know the status of. They've been officially signed, but there hasn't been any action taken. And there's also a few bills, I think you mentioned one yourself, about what you're going to propose next year. About
in January.
In January. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a few bills recommended throughout the Purple Report to enact and or potentially repeal because they're a hindrance to the education.
Well, thank you so much, and I would ask my colleagues, do you have any questions?
Very good. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as a former teacher here, we're right on time. Is there any public testimony? And Lisandro, are you coordinating this?
Hello? Does this work? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for putting together this hearing. This has been really informative. I just had one question triggered by a comment by Ms. Rhodes that only 35% of the students are eligible for UC and Cal State. But that was the number in the original master plan in 1960. The plan was that the UC would serve the top 10%, Cal State the rest of the top third, and the community college system the rest of the community, and that's a wonderful thing, this three-tiered system. But I did have a comment on something that happened a few years ago when we promised students that if they worked hard and achieved more, that we would make space for them in UC and Cal State. And the students stepped up to this challenge, and they worked harder, and more of them achieved, and they were more prepared. And what did we do? We tightened the requirements instead of making that space. So I'm concerned about the promises we make to our students and the pathways we create for them, and I just wanted to offer that comment.
Right, and a couple things that I would say. One, I remember when my predecessor, John Vasconcellos, wanted really all of higher education to be free. And we all want our students to be able to go to college. Unfortunately, we've had such a huge ongoing budget deficit, it runs at least $6 billion a year, that the legislature has not been able to keep that wonderful promise. And we all would like to do that. I mean, I remember when I had a loan scholarship and work on campus, McMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois, and I had 25 cents at the end of the week. 10 cents went for the washing machine, 10 cents went for the dryer. I had a nickel. Once a month I could go to the student union and have an egg salad sandwich like most kids. Where I'm going with that comment is until the economy really improves, we're not going to be able to do very much. In fact, when we passed the budget, we also said that we put in triggers so that if the money didn't come in as we hoped it would, there would be more automatic cuts to all the main areas, to higher education, to K-12, health and human services, public safety. So we may even be looking at tougher cuts. And I think the economy is not going to, as a former financial analyst at Stanford University, I don't think the economy is going to really improve for another 3 to 5 years. I mean, it'll go up and down a lot, but before we can really say it's a better economy. But students have a window of opportunity, and I understand that. That's why I talked about the 10 cents and the nickel and all that. And we have to figure out ways to see that these students have a way to go, and to see that transfer policies are really in place, really, that there's some accountability there so that some measure of the promise is kept. Okay, other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. It was a great panel. First, I just your comment just triggered something, of course, that waiting for the economy to recover is sort of backwards because it's all circular. I mean, the economy won't recover long term unless we invest in education, and if we wait to invest in education until the economy recovers, we've we kind of aren't going to get there. But anyway, the reason I wanted to comment was on the topic of disparity. It's been brought up a lot of times today about disparity, and as a member of a school board, and I'm in schools every day or every week, walking through classrooms and seeing what different classrooms have. And what's amazing to me is it's not really just a disparity from community to community or district to district. It's a disparity from classroom to classroom and school to school. And it's really hit or miss on what students have. Some teachers are really good at getting grants, so they have the projectors and computers in their classroom. Some teachers are not as good at that. Some schools do school-wide grants. Some schools don't. And so we have schools within districts that are fairly similar in demographics, some of which have computers in classrooms, some of which have a computer lab, and some of which don't have any computer access at all. And I represent a middle-class district. We're not a poor district. We're not one of the wealthy districts. And in fact, the interesting thing about that is that the disparity is sometimes greater in the middle-class district because there's extra money that goes into the poor districts. A lot of the corporations spend a lot of their time providing grants and support for what they consider to be underserved districts. The other districts are able to raise lots of money and get things in their classrooms. There are schools in the middle that are lost in that shuffle, that are not getting what they need. And just an example, we mentioned the Mind Institute. It's a great program. We call it GG Math in our district. It's really powerful. The schools that have implemented that technology have proven results on their math scores, going up significantly. So we're very happy with that. But what's happened is the Title I schools are able to afford it. They've put it in. They've improved their scores. The other schools in our district are struggling right now to figure out how to get that program into the classrooms. And we have schools that are not Title I schools that are falling through the cracks because they don't have the resources to get the same programs that the other schools have. So I just wanted to raise some of those points.
Thank you, David. That was David Cohen, a very good point, and the same thing happens in healthcare. And so these are some of the things that we really need to talk about and problem solve and figure out ways to see that resources are available for all people. So thank you very much. Berryessa School District, I also want to introduce Chuck Weiss, our County Superintendent of Education, and I believe Margaret Abe-Koga is here. I didn't see her. There she is, way over there. City Council in Mountain View. I have some closing comments. First of all, I'd like to, is there more? Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't see you. If you could stand up, please.
Oh, no,
it's not working?
Okay, there it is.
There, now it is.
Well, I really appreciate
and your name, please?
My name is Ronald Bolden, and again, I appreciate the opportunity being here. I think I actually fit the demographic that you were talking about with the programs. I mean, I come from Richmond Unified School District, what it was called at the time. I come from a single mother household. Went on to get an electrical engineering degree, went on to get a master's degree, worked in Silicon Valley, and even worked with an educational company that was an outreach company offering a free product to schools. And I dealt with constant pushback. And so as a person right now working with a company where right now we have the ability to fund or help every school self-fund themselves, which was the #1 excuse I heard from schools when I was bringing our program in, I want to find out as a 21st century company, which is what I represent, how are we going to embrace technology? And then how are we going to find advocates at different districts that are willing to embrace these type of ideas? Because I've seen nothing but pushback from introducing free to sources of income, which I'm talking about now. I've seen nothing but pushback. And I'm amazed by it because we need education, but we also need to have funding for the programs that are now no longer available. So I'm just curious to find out from your perspective, what can we do to kind of really embrace the 21st century solutions that are out there?
Well, for starters, I hope you will be connecting with Chuck Weiss, our County Superintendent of Education, and with our representatives from the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, just to begin the conversation. Second, I think by networking and actually connecting with school districts in the area where your company is a good way to see what you might be able to do. Are there any other thoughts on that? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
My name is Adora Fisher, and I'm actually
Would you like to stand up, please?
I'm from Cupertino Union School District.
Okay.
But my comments are not about Cupertino. My comments are about the lower socioeconomic populations, African American Latino students. And it's not a question, but one of the things that I did not hear today was a mindset about college. College is a mindset. Going to college, as we all know, is a mindset. And in lower socioeconomic populations, that mindset doesn't necessarily exist, and I'm just going to be transparent about that. And so to me, the issues are in kindergarten, starting to teach kids and talk to kids about their future, education, their ability to go to college. And I'm not hearing that conversation. You can put all the algebra and all the math that you want to put into a classroom. You can train your teachers as much as you want to. But if students do not have the mindset to be successful and to go to college and to strive for that success, it still will not happen. And so I am looking for that conversation. How do we change community mindsets? How do we begin to get students and parents and families to actually look at going to college? In Cupertino, I don't have to think about whether kids are going to college because they're going. It's not a question in their families, it's not a question in the community. But there are communities where that conversation and that mindset doesn't exist. And I'd like to see some NGOs and some businesses begin to work to start to create those mindsets. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was implicit in a lot of conversations that we expect a lot of our students to go to college. I would also say that for some students, we're really looking at career tech and some other fields. But a lot of these discussions are, I think, really out there, and certainly one of the reasons I'm holding this hearing, as I've done for several years, is to see that we have these wonderful tech companies in our area, and in order for them to have a level playing field, it's an old cliche, excuse me, but it's important, I think, for a lot of young people in our own communities to be hired by these companies. And for that to happen, our students have to do well in math and science, and I think that was one of the core tenets of this hearing. So thank you for being very explicit in that comment. So I'll go into my closing remarks. Today we heard about immediate and future workforce needs of employers, how other states are addressing similar shortages, what some other states are doing in ways that we can learn to meet the workforce demands of the new iApp economy, ensure that California is competitive in the global marketplace as well as competitive with the states close by. We also heard how emerging technologies intersect with education. Dr. Warschauer, who has dedicated many years of his life to the research and teaching of this topic, helped us to understand the benefits and disadvantages of integrating new media devices in the classroom. Two of Silicon Valley's most prominent groups, Silicon Valley Education Foundation and Silicon Valley Leadership Group, talked about how we are integrating with schools technologies to help teachers with lesson planning and classroom learning, and talking about the assessment piece, which is really lacking, beginning to happen, but still we need to do much more in that area, both at the local level and at the state level and at the federal level. Lastly, we heard recommendations from the California Council on Science and Technology on how the legislature can enhance California's competitiveness, and what are the next steps we should be taking to move forward and implement a digitally enhanced education in California. Our teacher, Mr. Shea, talked about the things that are happening in the classroom and what still needs to be done, which we appreciated. And from today's testimony, we really learned that we must continue to work together as a community, and I believe that's really what it comes down to. We have communities at the local level, and there are communities even at the state level. And we must, as a community, say that education is really important, that math and science are important, and is when I ran for the school board back in 1983 and served for 8 years, that every student counts and that every student ought to have the same opportunity to get a world-class education. And yes, we need to fulfill our promise. And unfortunately, it probably will happen when I'm out of the legislature. But I have always had that goal and carried legislation, which once in a while got shot down because we didn't have the funding resources for that. I look forward to continue to work with all of you and other stakeholders and to ensure that we have the skilled workforce. And we'll also be working with my colleagues. And whatever ideas that you have, please communicate them to me. And I do believe there's going to be a way, Mr. Shea, that in the very near future for us to do a better job of finding who needs the resources, connecting with who has them, and that certainly will continue to be one of my goals. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you to my colleagues, and Mr. Fong and Ms. Campos. Thank you very much.
Good job. Very good job.